Hey guys, greetings. Day after Thanksgiving in the U.S. Anyway, some conversation in some of the posts last night I saw while I was vegging out back looking at the stars late at night and had my phone and was looking at some posts. Um, a little misunderstanding, maybe on my part, maybe on your part, but nonetheless, I see it, so we need to correct it. And we need to talk about stop losses in these tight situations. So, first of all, the stop loss is there to allow the natural progression of what market price movement does in order to do what it does. And if we remember how I've said what happens on the charts and what you do trading wise are two different things. You can't marry them as a trader. You have to understand they're different things. What I mean by that, and I'll probably hear you'll probably hear say this several times in this little video, is the market is the market. It does not care whether you're in a trade. It does not care if you are in the trade where you entered the trade. It does not care if you entered a trade and where you entered the trade and where you put your stop loss. The market is the market. When we trade, we put a layer over the top of what the market is. And we can't just do that randomly. The market's going to continue what it wants to do. The reason a lot of the old paradigm fails is because it does stuff randomly. So we never, ever just assume we can always have a relationship between our entry and the stop loss be linked together, i.e., I have put my stop loss 50 pips behind my entry. Old paradigm. It should be covering a swing low or a swing high, even in the old paradigm. So here's the challenge with all of this in terms of what it does to you and how it starts molding you as a trader. Let's think of a scan. Um, that's right. I can't do that with this tool. So let me readjust that here. Give me a second. Okay. And here's our D, and here is our printed D entry line. So here's the reality about the move coming out of here. Doesn't matter whether we're QuickFire or we've progressed into a Charlie Delta trade. I don't have the other half of the scan on there, but you know what I'm talking about here. So we're talking about that D point there at the swing high, and price is leaving it. So what we have to allow to happen, especially in this very early stage, is for price to come back against us as it started into the trade and essentially, in the terms of QuickFire, test this green entry line, which is why we have a stop loss. And again, there's averages being taken to some extent. We have a stop loss that would be outside the pitchfork. So in the very early stages of this game, we can allow price to not only come back and check the harmonic target, the harmonic line. Remember, this is four fibos in one, four fibos overlaying each other. So it's a very, very strong line. It also means if it bounces, it also has a magnetic pull. So this can very often come up and retest this line, which looks like a breach of the pitchfork if you had a pitchfork on there, right? But if you have your MSL or your ESL out here, it does allow you to have that check. This is very important in the early stages of this move. And that's because, as you advanced traders know, this move out from this swing high So from our swing high, I'll draw it a little bigger up here. This move out is an impulsive move. And that means somewhere along the line there's going to be a 1-2 move. And in a 1-2 move, this 2 is allowed to come all the way back to the entry point here, the origin of the 1. Normally it turns around in the 50, this would be 50, to 61.8 line. It turns around 73% of the time there. But it has to have the ability to come back and check that line. This is why if you haven't seen that distinct move for the 2, just because you're at 8 pips, you don't want to move your trade to break even plus 1. You may deny yourself the opportunity for that to come back and check that line. And then once that 2 move is finished, it takes off big and bold to 3, because the 2 to 3 move is a very impulsive move. So back to where we were here, you can't just randomly have a stop loss, because your stop loss is an overlay on this price action that's taking place on the chart in terms of the price move, in terms of the length of it, in terms of the percentage retracements, and all that. So you just can't act randomly. That's kind of old school trading, all right? And we're not old school traders. The other thing is, it doesn't get you in the proper frame of mind. Okay, remember what I said is about the market doesn't care where you get in, where you get out. So what we want to do is make sure this stop loss from entry, if we're just doing QuickFire, has an absolute distance from the entry line. From the entry line, 10 pips. Later we'll get to where we can get it down to 5, but right now let's just have some good practices with 10. So if that's the case, you just can't randomly come down here and be, 12 pips into the trade because this is a big move. You had a big CD leg, and 12 pips doesn't look very far. You just can't randomly come down 12 pips and then say, well, I'll put my stop loss 10 pips behind that. Because at that point, you're under the entry line. So your stop loss would prevent a deep wave 2 from coming back, checking the entry line. Your stop loss may prevent, depending on how soon you have it and how it all, the angle of the fork, if you're trading Charlie Delta, that arbitrary stop loss may not even allow it to come back and check the pitchfork line. And what about the person that would want to enter this trade 18 pips into the move? I know I'm exaggerating, but I'm trying to make a point. So if he enters 18 pips into the move, are you telling me he's going to have his stop loss at the 10 pip line? By putting your stop loss 10 pips from your entry, which is random, it has nothing to do with the harmonics of price movement. It's totally random based on what? Your entry. Well, if it's based on your entry, guess what's going to happen? You become kind of laissez-faire. You don't have to be prepared to enter the trade at, the green entry line. You haven't already measured divergence 3 pips away from it as price was approaching it. You might not even have been paying attention to RSI or the Bollingers. You wait till it hits and then it starts coming down. Now you go back and check this. Oh yeah, it actually hit all that stuff. It's okay for me to enter at the 12 pip line. It gives you this casualness about the trade that it's okay to enter. Oh, well, the qualifications were there. It doesn't matter if I enter 12 pips late. Can't do that. The market is not random. The market price movement goes by harmonics. You can't come and overlay your trading on top of that in a random fashion. All of the stuff we do is designed to protect you, to allow the natural harmonics to play out and not hurt you, and also for you to take advantage of those natural harmonics. Okay? So somebody pointed out last night, well, if it's going to actually be from the line and I enter the trade late, then my risk is increased. Absolutely. Absolutely. Your risk gets increased. Doesn't matter how many lots you have in the trade. If you're going to allow the exposure back, if the exposure back has to be bigger, because see, whether you enter at this, whether you enter here or somebody else enters here, you both have to have the same stop loss, because the stop loss is based on harmonics, not your entry point. Very, very, very important. And so, yes, because this guy is stretching it out, trader one's here, trader's two here. Trader two now has more risk in the trade. If he does his calculations at 10 pips using trade calc, and he lets the stop loss be 15 pips because he got into a trade 5 pips late, well, that's a problem. Well, I like to use the closed candle method, Steve, and if I drop down to a 5-minute chart and I'm watching a 5-minute candle, sometimes it moves 4, 5, 6, 7 pips beyond the entry point. Find another trade. Remember way back when I started teaching you guys, I put up slides and I've repeated them a couple of times. You need to pull it out and make a screenshot of it. What it takes to be a trader. You have to have logic. You have to have common sense. Now, we don't have all those attributes first. We have to look at it, see where our strengths are, accentuate that, and then drop down to see what our weaknesses are compared to that chart, and start working to grow in those areas. That's the growth you have to go through. You just can't look at a picture like that, a graphic like that, which defines what it takes to be a successful trader, know you have weaknesses, and ignore them. So common sense in trading is something that takes time to get. So nobody comes out of the womb, trading with great common sense. It just doesn't happen. Common sense comes from logic you learn by having taken volumes of trades. This is why I keep saying some of you guys are so impatient. You just want to get ahead technically, and your head isn't growing at the same pace. And that will mess you up. You cannot force your head to grow fast, because you don't have the time to make the trades, to make the mistakes, to have them reviewed, to have that process learn, to create learning. Oh, Steve says, in his trading community, you need 100 trades at this color level. And so I says, well, I have 8 hours a day. I could trade 20 trades a week. So in 5 weeks, I'll be able to go to the next color level. And it's like, no, guess what? You're not going to get the growth. You're not going to get the mental growth. It doesn't matter that you can go to a chart and see what you think is entry criteria. You have to grow your head. So this is where patience is required. Expectations have to be set accordingly. The Forex is a wonderful beast. It's an absolute wonderful beast. The rewards are huge, immense, however you want to look at it, measure it. But you cannot accelerate them beyond their natural acceleration points. You can't just force it. And everybody wants to get ahead by the technical stuff. The second thing I've noticed is, and I did a video, the day before Thanksgiving, talking about being married to a trade, being desperate, having FOMO, not to trade crap. The more lottery ticket crap trades you take, the more it's going to hurt you than help you, and you're going to have to overcome that in your RAS. You're going to have to go through more growth. Going through the growth is hard enough. When you start taking lottery ticket trades, it's going to require more growth. All right, so we got the point set about this stop loss. We were talking about one of the dangers is it could make you, not only does it increase your risk in the trade, but then it can make you kind of casual, laissez-faire, however you want to view it, in regards to late entries. And this is a part of selectivity. So you need to be ready at that green line. By the time price gets there, you already know whether you're taking the trade or not. You've already done all the other measurements. They're not going to change that much within a pip or two. And you should already have your RAS focused for the one criteria or that isn't there yet, and you're watching price move and you're watching that green line, and you're watching the criteria. So as it hits that green line, oh yeah, it finally went past 70. I could take this trade. And if a 5-minute candle close gets too big on you, and that's going to happen. You really don't want to be much more than 2, 3, 4 pips at the most into a trade. So if you can't get that 5 minute candle to close, the excuse is not, well, the candle didn't close. No, the excuse should be, or the reality should be, I'm not taking that trade because it doesn't fit my criteria. Look for another trade. That's selectivity. Oh, but I already have my thing drawn on. I already copied the scan over to my trading view, and I haven't had a trade in 2 days, and the last trade I took was a loser. So I want to take this. That's your subconscious doing its desperation act, instead of allowing your conscious selectivity to come in there and say, you know, this is going to create too big of a stop for me. I don't like trading with 3%, 4% to a trade that I should have no more than 2% in. Now, a lot of the stuff with risk and risk management is kind of back burner while you're demo trading. I get it. But you do have to understand the position sizing. And, one of the things that I mentioned before is that in demo trading, you know, when you're being serious, you want to make sure that you're going through the lot calculations. Doesn't matter that it's demo trading. That's not about trying to win. That's about doing what you're supposed to do as a trader. Remember the stories we've talked about on the self-development side from people saying, well, you know, I'm not going to do that now because I'm not a millionaire, but once I get to be a millionaire, then I'll do it. And it's like, no, 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 no. The reason the guy got to be a millionaire is because he did these practices all along. You want to be trading now, and I'm not talking about your pursuit of win-loss, but in terms of things like selectivity. Once you get past that stage of, okay, I know what a pitchfork is, I know which angle it belongs, I know how to make a traditional pitchfork. Once you get past the stages of understanding what's going on, it's, you still want to put pressure on the win, but you still want to take trades as if you were trading live. What about experimentation? You said our demo accounts aren't to win, they're to learn. But that you have to understand, again, common sense. You can't allow your demo trading to be so experimental and to think it's just going to remain on the charts, that it's not going to impact your head. So, if you use TradeCalc, you would see that if I calculate my stop, if I calculate my risk, if I calculate my position sizing, how many lots are going to be put in the trade based on my stop loss and my 2% and whatnot, you have to see that if you expand that to 15 pips to 20 pips, that your risk increases with that amount of lots. You're just moving the stop too far back. It's not a random thing. It impacts the risk in the trade, which means the percentage loss. So you can't randomly just enter a trade late just because you're entering a demo account and because you falsely thought that your stop could just be 10 pips behind wherever you enter. Because the stop loss, once it moves below the D entry line, once it moves below and stays below, your pitchfork line, the harmonics are at play. And it doesn't matter where you entered that trade. All right, I think I beat this horse dead, or I'm beating a dead horse, or however that cliche goes. So, from your entry, no. From the green entry line, yes. This is another reason you're really looking for trades to take place at the entry line. If you look at, not all, but the majority of losses, take a look at them. Where are they happening? It was 3 pips from the entry line. It was 4 pips from the entry line. Past it. Doesn't matter. The ones that have much more success are the trades that take place right at that entry line. Again, that's because it's a huge, powerful point. And that power goes away. As I said the other day in that video, you have to treat that green entry line no differently than you would treat a pitchfork bounce. Do we take a pitchfork bounce when price comes up and goes past it 4 pips? No. It doesn't, because the scan is still there, because the scan technically is still valid. Again, we're talking about the scan. We're not talking about your trading. So the fact that the scan's valid, well, that's nice. It might still mean it's not time to be trading this. And there are plenty of trades to take where the price does hit the green entry line. Well, not as many, obviously, because they're a subset of everything you're going to take. So just be aware. You can't just play this game randomly. And what I've done over the years is learned where those math points are. So I'm not going to violate them. I mean, you're really playing Russian roulette when you do that. So your trade results are not going to be very good if you put a trading system together that violates the math that's based in price movement. And the math comes from market geometry. The math comes from understanding how the scan lines are built. The math comes from a little knowledge of Elliott wave. So we've kind of all built that together in a safety net. And if you violate that, your trade results are going to be all over the board. All right, so you've got this stop loss thing clarified. Time to move on. Y'all have a great weekend.